Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Congregation Emanu-El. So before we start, it's just a reminder, the two of us have our masks off because we are up here, but we're going to ask everybody to please keep their masks on throughout the entire service. And to begin, I'd like to invite up the Apta family to help us bring in Shabbat by lighting the Shabbat candles.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik neh shel Shabbat.
So we are continuing on page 20 with Lachadodi, which is really about us stepping into Shabbat, but also now that Shabbat has begun, really welcoming that in. It's almost like we're beginning to push out everything from the week that we no longer want to carry with us and make this shift into a time of being. We're on page 20.
Lecha dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabelai Shamor וזכור לדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ותפארת ולתהילה יוי לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת לקראת שבת לכל בניך היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם ניסוך סוף מעשה במחשבתך לא יוי לך דודי לקראת כלה הנה שבת נקבלה התעוררי היבהורך ומיורי יורי יורי שדברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה יוי לך דודי לקראת כלה הנה שבת שלום תרד בעלה גם בשמחה ובצולה תוך אמונה המסגולה בואי חלה בואי חלה ay ay lechadoni yikrat ala pnei Shabbat nekabela ay ay lechadoni likrat kala pnei Shabbat pnei Shabbat nekabela ay 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 Shabbat, B'nei Shabbat, nekabela.
Please be seated. On page 24, we're turning to Shalom Aleichem, which is about these angels that enter our lives right now. And this week where we are in Parshat Vayishlach, there's a lot about angels. Well, there's some interpreters that see angels, that whatever happens in that place of darkness when Jacob is wrestling, there's some say that there are angels at work there that literally are wrestling. Question is, what are they wrestling about? But that's a different discussion. And so Shalom Aleichem is as if these angels are coming in. And just when I imagine Jacob being pulled into that darkness, into that place of transformation, Shalom Aleichem is about asking ourselves, as we move into the Shabbat, where do we need to be pulled to? What do we need to let go of so we can transform into the Shabbat and become who we want to be? We're on page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Please rise and turn to page 28. Please be seated and join me on page 30 in the English. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly choruses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsevaot is your name, ever-living God. May you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, Amari Varavi Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shorbeinu u'kumenu na'asiach b'chlekecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה נגי יומם הלילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha U'v'chol me'odecha Ve'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele Asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibata bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot. And wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together.
Yai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, micha mocha ba'elim Adonai, micha mocha nedar v'kodesh nora tzilot oseh telet nora tzilot oseh telet nachotecha ravanecha okeyayam lifnei Moshe Miriam Zeli Anu ve'amru Anu ve'yamru Adonai Yimloch Leholam Vahed Adonai Yimloch Leholam Vahed Yai lai Ay ay la la ay lai 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 ay 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 lai la lai ay lai 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 benemar kifara Yaakov uge'alo miad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael.
We now reach the point in our service where we say Misha Berach, the blessing, for those who are in need of healing, either of body or of spirit, or sometimes both. As a congregation, we are praying for Frank Friedman, Rusty Holden, Lauren Knickerbocker, Micah Goldsmith, Nancy Frank, Lou Aronow, Kathy Sable, Billy Applebaum, Harold Miller, Isaac Judah Dan, Art Pitch, Jessica Galloway, Raphael Eckert, Lauren Van Horn, Orwin Chip Chaslow, Roderick Dowling, and Donna Linser. If there's someone else who you are praying for the healing, please share their name when my hand passes over you.
Mi sheberach avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema. Spirit, and let us say, Amen. Page 42. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom, Lishalom, Ve'hamidenu Shomreinu Lechaim, Frosalenu Sukat Shlomecha, Rosalenu Sukat Shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us daily wrong from right.
We continue on page 46 with the Amidah. And after the first few blessings, we will move into silence. And when you are done with your silent prayer there, we're going to invite you to please be seated. We're on page 46. Please rise. Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Ufi Agid Eilateh. Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Ufi Agid Tehilatecha, Ufi Agid Tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'Imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor ve'Hanura, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Ve'Konei HaKol, Ve'Zocher Chazdei Avot ve'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Dezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayeh HaKol Berachamim Ravim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, U'Matir Hasurim, U'Mekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Ba'al Gevurot, U'Mido Melach, Melech Memit U'Mechayeh, U'Matzmiach Yeshua, V'Neheman Atala HaChayot HaKol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol, Atah Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kdoshim B'chol Yom Yahalelucha Selah, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Thanksgiving. Our tradition gives liturgical thanks going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And we just prayed the silent words on page, well, we were on a different page, but I'm looking at the same thing on 162 as part of the silent prayer we just did that says, Modim, thanks, Modim anachnu lach, for the good in us which calls us to a better life, we give thanks. There are others who have also written prayers of thanks, of thanksgiving, one of whom is a personal hero of mine, named Johnny Cash. we've come to the time in the season when family and friends gather near, offer a prayer of thanksgiving for blessings we've known through the years, to join hands and thank the Creator. And now when Thanksgiving is due, this is the year when I count my blessings. I'm thanking dear God who made you. This is the year when I count my blessings. I'm thanking dear God who made you. I'm grateful for the laughter of children, the sun and the wind and the rain, the color of blue in your sweet eyes, sight of a high-balling train, the moonrise over a prairie, old love that you've made new. This year when I count my blessings, I'm thanking dear God who made you. Oh, this year when I count my blessings, I'm thanking dear God who made you. And when the time comes to be going, it won't be in sorrow and tear. I'll kiss you goodbye and I'll go on my way, grateful for all of the years. I thank you for all that you gave me, for teaching me what love can do. Thanksgiving Day for the rest of my life, I'm thanking dear God who made you. Thanksgiving Day for the rest of my life, I'm thanking dear God who made you.
I may have said this before, but I don't know of any other cantor in the United States that shape shifts the way Cantor Luck does. It's awe-inspiring. It's incredible. I hope everyone realizes just how lucky we are. It's as rare as it gets. So earlier this week, I had dinner with a friend. It's a friend I hadn't seen. He lives in Israel, lives in Tel Aviv. He's Israeli. Hadn't seen him in, it feels like 10 years, since before the pandemic. And when we sat down to have dinner, we began reflecting on everything that had happened since the last time we saw each other. And we look at you and go, "Oi! It's been some time, it's been a lot." And he says, and it stuck with me, he said, in a thick Israeli accent, he goes, like when you watch those really intense action movies and they get you and you just can't believe it happened? I go, yeah. He goes, and then they make the sequel? And the sequel has to be more intense than the first one? I go, yeah. He goes, I feel like we're on episode 5. And what makes those so intense is that you plan for what you expect the world to be, and then it's not that. And if I had sat down with him years ago and said, let me just tell you, let's think about the future. We wouldn't have thought of a pandemic, of an insurrection, of wildfires, of the sun just not coming out one day in the Bay Area, of George Floyd, of shooting in synagogues, of Nazis marching in public. None of us, we wouldn't have thought of any of it. We wouldn't have planned for it either. And it's not that we don't plan, because we do plan. It's what we do. It's what we should do. It's how we exist in the world. If you think about our buildings, we retrofit our buildings preparing for an earthquake. We stick those exit signs there, God forbid, in case there's a fire. It's our human instinct. It's what we do. We prepare. And this week, in this week's Parsha Vayishlach, we see Jacob doing this. Now Jacob, if we go back before, Jacob steals his brother's blessing. And if you look at all of Genesis, it's like one huge dysfunctional family. You don't want your kids to be like any of these people. And there's bad moments. This is a pretty bad moment. His mother lies to her husband to deceive the other son in order to get the blessing. And then he steals the blessing from his blind and dying father. And then Esau says to Jacob, I'm going to kill you. And Jacob wants nothing to do with this, and he's scared to death, so he runs. And then he runs his entire life as if running to the next thing is going to make it all better and he's going to find a new reality. But I know we have some therapists in the room. Not surprisingly enough, when he runs to the next town, he recreates the same childhood he was just in. He marries into a family where now his father-in-law deceives him and lies to him. And he marries the wrong woman. And then eventually the right woman. But he keeps running away from the thing that he's so afraid of. Until finally he realizes where we are this week, that he actually needs to face his brother. And he does what many of us do. He scenario plans. He thinks, hey, what could happen here? Because I've been really afraid of this. And so the first thing he thinks about is, you know something? Diplomacy. I'm going to use diplomacy. He sends cattle, he sends gifts, thinking that that'll, assuage Esau's anger. But he diversifies. He realizes, diplomacy might not work. And if diplomacy doesn't work, we're going to end up in a war together. And so he begins preparing for war. And so he takes his camp and he splits it into two. So just in case Esau attacks, only half of what he owns will be destroyed. So he did diplomacy with a backup of war. But then, he's a nice good Jewish boy in the Torah, so he prays some too. So he prays to God. And so he really thinks he has his bases covered, that he has all of this going on. But for Jacob, as for so many of us in our lives, life does not turn out the way he had prepared. All the scenarios that he had planned for didn't actually come to fruition. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs argues that if you read this parsha, just on the pshat, like on the surface level of how it's read, there is profound value and lessons on how one should respond to crises. If you add midrash to it and you get fancy, he says you kind of miss the point. Sachs writes, quote, even in the 21st century, when we know so much about the universe, cosmology, the human genome, the working of the human brain, there is one thing that we do not know, and we never will. And that's what tomorrow will bring. After Jacob does all of this preparations, the unexpected occurs. Jacob, he crosses over the Yabok River, and then in the complete darkness, he finds a man, or it may have been an angel, or it may have been himself. But none of that really matters. Because what he finds there in that darkness, he was not prepared for. And this week is a lesson on how we deal with what we didn't plan for. Jacob had spent his life running from his external fears. He ends up planning for all the external realities that he could imagine, except for the one thing that he's been avoiding, the one thing that he was not prepared for, the one thing that he found in the darkness of that night. Now, what he saw in that darkness is what, and if you've been in the desert at nighttime, you know you can see nothing with your eyes. You put your hand up to your face, you can't even see your hand. But what he sees that night, he sees what's within him. He sees what he's been running from his entire life. Jacob wrestled that night with the unknown. He wrestled with the fears he had of his brothers. He wrestled with himself, with his doubts, with his regrets. And he didn't have a plan for this moment. So the only thing that he could do in that moment was to react to what life had thrown at him. And then the only thing he could do was throw himself into the crises, into the unknown that surrounded him at that moment. The Rashbam, who was Rashi's grandson, who was born in 1085 in Troyes, France, he compares Jacob to Jonah. And if you remember Jonah, Jonah's the one who runs away from God when God commands him to do something. He says, just like Jacob. But in this case, it's a little different. According to the Rashbam, Jacob is running away from his fear. He runs away knowing that he cannot prepare for tomorrow, because we never actually know what tomorrow will be. Now, according to Rashbam, God sends an angel to stop him and to wrestle him to the ground. It takes a heavenly figure to hold him back all night long in fear, from the fear that he's running from. And it's not that he's living through the moment that we've been avoiding, that moment he's running from, it's not going to leave a mark. Because in a movie, it'd be wonderful. The son comes, he's a stronger, changed person, and he's the same. But we know that's not how life works. The crises that we are not prepared for, they will leave a mark. Because those experiences that we all go through, they always leave a mark. These years that we've all been through with this pandemic and everything else that you can think back in your own personal lives and our national lives are going to have an effect on us deeper than any of us in this room can comprehend. And we won't be aware of it today. May not even be in a decade from now. But the effect will be revealed over time. And Jacob, he does not walk away from that night of wrestling in the darkness. He limps away, because limping is a part of life when you have been through the darkest of times. But if you look right before Jacob limps, you see a gift that was left for us right inside of the Torah there. Rabbi Sachs, he points out that right before Jacob, who is now Israel, he gets his name changed from Jacob to Israel, that's his blessing. Right before he gets up to walk away, he demands from the darkness. He demands from what he did not prepare for. He demands from that heavenly figure, and he grabs the figure and says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Think about that. He realizes in that moment that being in his darkness, it can be transformed into a blessing. And then he refuses to let go of his most fear moment until he can squeeze a blessing out of this moment. Now, he may be limping, but Jacob has been transformed into Israel. That moment affects us. That's why we're called the people of Israel. That's how significant it is to step into that darkness. That transformation, it no longer has him running away into the darkness, but he's actually turned around and he's now limping back toward his brother. where he falls on his brother's neck and he kisses him. Now, Cantor Addy earlier this week pointed out to me, it's something I'd never known before, that this moment is so incredibly significant and transformative that we see something occur in the Torah which does not occur in any other place, in any other line, in any other word, in the entirety of the Torah. Right above that word that says kiss, there are dots right across the top of it. There's no punctuation, there's no bold or italics in the Torah. It's just a bunch of letters, except for right in this one spot. And it sticks out, it kind of pops off the page like a neon sign in the middle of all these black and white letters. And it shows us that love and peace are not found for what we prepared for, but for reacting and engaging with the parts of life that we did not ask for, the parts of life we may never have wanted. But if we grab hold of those moments, present it to us, and then demand a blessing from them, we just may go limping into a new day, lighter and more peaceful than we've ever been. Shabbat Shalom.
Page 339. Esainai el Harim, Esainai el Harim. This was a version of Esainai that I learned at Camp Newman last summer. It was written by the head song leader, Ellie Sherman. I first met Ellie when she was 2, and I was studying in Israel for the year. Her mother was in my class. Camp Newman opened for the first time this summer in 4 years since the fire. I took a lot of strength from this melody, which will have an English part that I'll teach you. Let's sing the refrain again. Esainai el Harim, Esainai el Harim, Me'ahin Yavo Ezri, Yavo Ezri, Me'ahin Yavo Ezri, Yavo Ezri. I look to the stars on the mountains. I look to the stars on the mountains, and I know where my help comes from. And I know where my help comes from. I look to the stars on the mountains, and I know where my help comes from. Me'ahin Yavo Ezri, Yavo Ezri, Me'ahin Yavo Ezri, Yavo Ezri. I look to the stars on the mountains, and I
stars on the mountains, and I know where my help comes from.
We're on page 282 for the Elenu. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתקן ולעוצר בראשית, שלא שנגי הרצון, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. We reach the point in our service when we remember those who are no longer with us. As a congregation, we remember those who have passed away in the last 30 days. Joseph Ehrman III, Theodore Jabel, Lisa Fair, Paul Latin, Michael Tafuri, Charlie Davis Jr., Nancy Bechtel, Dr. Gary Gitnick, Sylvia Namvit, Bernard Gordon, Mary Ann Tonkin, and Joel Belinfante. We remember those who passed away whose anniversary falls on this Shabbat. Sidney Axelrod, Rabbi Camillus Angel, Marshall Bach, Marion M. Baer, Harold J. Baer, Raphael Bendezu, Mark Jeffrey Bill, Ralph L. Kaufman, Edward Cooper, Robert Cowan, Jeanette DeHovitz, Elizabeth Denenbeim, Clara Heller Ehrman, Joseph Ehrman Jr., Leo Ehrlich, Jacob Friedman, Colette Gill Goldenstein, Olga Gluck, Donald Grossman, Ruth Grossman, Ruth Halpern, B. Heller, Leona Hirschberg, Ronald Isaacs, Douglas Jacobs, Ruth Jacobs, Michael Henry Kiak, Stan Kleiner, Julius Nee, Aid Kushner, Diane Romaine Lando, Nancy Livingston, Forrest Fraser McDonald, Mary Mack, Kate Madfis, John T. Magnan, Sally Maycock Voss, Stephen Meyer, Franklin Miller, William M. Moser Sr., Joseph Nagel, Bertha Jane Nebenzahl, Leonard Osias, Evelyn Plotkin, Nicole Rosenthal, Helen Kempler Schiff, Gilbert Schnitzer, Annette Grumman Schultz, Richard Seelig, Francis Weisbaum Shenson, Marvin Siegel, Arthur Sugarman, Julian Toole, Richard Vanderbosch, Norbert Westheimer, Douglas Brian Winokur, Elizabeth Zampa, and Joseph Leon Zarefsky. If there's someone else who you are remembering who either passed away in the last week, in the last month, in the last year, or this is the yahrzeit, the anniversary of your loved one's passing, if you will please share their name when my hand passes over you. Rabbi Sidney Axelrod. I invite you to please rise and turn to page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad divrach yotev yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'gala u'bizman kari v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mavarach le'olam amei amaya, yitbarak v'yishtabach v'tba'ar v'tramam v'yitnaseh, v'tadar v'taleh v'talal shmei d'kudasha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, damiran bi'ama v'imramen, Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Oseh shalom nimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru.
I'd like to invite up Eli and Violet, but first, if you can grab the Kiddush cups, I'm going to have them lead us in our Friday night Kiddush. They become bar and bat mitzvah tomorrow. So grab those cups and come right on up here. No, take both. It's some very mediocre wine. You're going to love it. We are on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzav banu v'shabbat kodsho ve'ahava uvratzon hinhilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit Kihu yom tehillah lemikra kodesh secher letzidka ממצרים, קיוונו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך, ואהבה ורצון, הנחלתנו. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-Shabbat.
You can have a virtual sip there. Now, I tell you how exciting this is for me. They went to preschool with my kids, and we then traveled to Israel together on a trip pre-pandemic a little while ago. So it's very exciting that you're about to become adults in our community. So a few announcements. We have a big interfaith service, Thanksgiving service honoring our own Rita Semmel, who just turned 100 years old this week. So you can wish her a happy birthday on your way out. And plus, if you go to Lombard and, what street is it? Franklin? Lombard and Franklin, and look up on the post. Rita is on the post. She's one of the famous San Franciscos that is now up when you're driving by. So slow down, don't get in an accident, but you'll see Rita up there. November 30th, we are having a huge Hanukkah celebration in Golden Gate Park at the Band Shell. We have on December 3rd, the teen-led service, you know that incredible service we have during high holidays? They're on tour again, and they're coming for Hanukkah. So December 3rd here, and we're having a high school in-person Hanukkah Havdalah here on December 4th with teens from all over the Bay. So as we exit here, we're going to do Motzi, and then I'm going to ask everybody to please take their prayer books to the back cart. So if you could join me for, and I guess we will imagine you're supposed to not speak, I think, until you eat, but we'll give a dispensation today after the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, b'tei avon. Shabbat shalom.
La 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 bim bam 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 ya ba 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 bam. Ya ba 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 bim bam 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 ya ba 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 bam. Shabbos, Shabbos, so sein Shabbos, 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 so sein, ya ba 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 bim bam bam bam, ya ba 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 bam. Hey, ya ba 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 bim bam bam bam, ya ba 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 bam. Shalom, shalom, so sein, shalom, 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 so sein, ya ba 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 bim bam bam bam, ya ba 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 bam. Ya ba 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 bim bam bam bam, ya ba 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 bam. Shabbos, Shabbos, so sein Shabbos, 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 so sein, ya ba 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 bim bam bam bam, ya ba 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 bam. Ya ba 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 bim bam bam bam, ya ba 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 ba.